The following program is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministries.
The subject today, who will help them? Who will help them? And this is to just kind of get all of us refocused on mission. And let me just say at the start that I am grateful for the mission work of Mount Zion. And you can give that a hand. The church itself and this group, the work that you do, we do is phenomenal. And what you saw in the video didn't even begin to touch the magnitude of the work both inside and outside the walls of this church. And so thank you. Jesus raises an issue over 2,000 years ago in this particular text. And it's an issue that we face today. Anybody that says the Bible is not relevant, is not contemporary to what's happening today really don't know how to read the Bible. Because on these pages, we really could report the news right from these pages. And so we're going to visit with Jesus and the disciples and a multitude of people some 2,000 years ago and see if we can't see ourselves today. Part of the reason that Jesus came to this earth was to model for us what it would mean to be a Christian, a disciple of Jesus Christ, after he had returned. And that was important because he only came to stay 33 years. And really, his major work was done in 3. And when he left, he would leave human beings. Imagine that. God would leave mere human beings in charge of, responsible for carrying on his mission. And because he was such a masterful teacher, the first thing he did was to model what he expected. And then he taught precepts of what he expected and how we were supposed to live. But first he models it. And so we see him in this particular passage modeling what he expects. And what is he doing? In Matthew chapter 9 and throughout the 4 Gospels, he is doing missionary work. He is moving around the region on what we call missionary journeys. He is preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and he is healing broken people. He is dealing with the tragedies that each of them face in their lives. And word spreads because the more he helps people, the more they testify. And the more they testify, the more people come to him. And in chapter 9, we just get a glimpse of him healing people and touching people. And as a result of that, we come to verse 36, and it says that a multitude of people were before him. And you know why they have come to him? You know why they have met him as he is moving around doing the work? Because word has spread that there's a teacher who's on a mission and he's helping folk. And folk who need help ought to find him. You know, that example was for us. That we ought to be on the move, helping folk. And when the word spread that we are genuinely transforming lives, guess what? You won't have to go on the radio. You won't have to go on Facebook. You won't have to go on Snapchat, Instagram. No, people will find you because their needs will drive them. Look at verse 36 because I want to show you something. I told you this is a living book. I want you to look in the middle of the verse first, and let me read and get you to it. It says, but when he saw the multitude, he was moved with compassion on them because they fainted. See that word right there, fainted? he begins right there to identify for us and to paint a picture of the nature of the people who are in the multitude. It says, these are people, as Jesus looked at them, who are fainting. And when we hear that word today, we don't, okay, you mean they're going to pass out? No. And so what I want media to do is put up verse 36 in the Amplified Version. And what I want to help you to see is what that word faint really means. And for those of you that don't know, the King James Version is a version of the Bible, and it's 1611 primarily. It was first translated, and it's what I call Old English. And so some people have taken it upon themselves, scholars, to write the Bible in different translations. And this one that you see on the screen is a part of the Amplified, which means they take the words that may mean nothing to us now and expand on them to help us understand them. And so here we go, verse 36. And when he saw the throngs, multitude, and it wasn't just a multitude, but these were people who were pressing in on him, trying to get something. He was moved with pity and sympathy for them because they were, here we go. He expands upon the word faint, and listen at what he says, bewildered. A multitude of people who are bewildered, who are confused because they've been trying to navigate through life to be successful, and they have been failing at it. They got issues, they got problems, they've sought help in other places, but they just can't figure this thing, life, out. And so they are bewildered, and in their bewilderment, they are coming to Jesus. Listen, in parentheses, these are people in the multitude who've been harassed. Harassed by who, Pastor? Harassed by life. How many of you know life itself will harass you? Not only have they been harassed by life, where stuff just happened, but other people. Especially when you are like the people in this text who are primarily Jews, but they live in a Roman Empire where they're under oppression, and they're just subject to a power that's greater than them. So you got a government that harasses you. You got employers that harass you. And then there's this fella who's real called Satan, or the devil, whatever you call him, who harasses us. People who are in distress. You got that right, because most of us in here have been in distress at one point or another. You got your situation and you are stressed. Somebody say they're stressed right now. And not only are they stressed, but dejected. Because when this stuff pile up on you, bewilderment, harassment, distress, you start feeling dejected and you get down on yourself. And you get down on your situation. And it's dangerous when you get down on yourself and your situation, because the next word pops in, and that's helplessness. And helpless people become hopeless. And hopeless people are dangerous. Because since I feel helpless and there's no way out for me and I'm hopeless, I can do anything I want to do because I don't fear reprisal. So you say, well, you'll go to jail. So what? Jail might be a blessing. My situation's so jacked up. Jail might be better. You're going to drop out of school and you won't have a future. So I don't have a future now. And I don't see where staying in school will benefit me. Come out the streets, get a job. What? What is that? Nobody wants me. I don't even want myself. I told you this was a living book, right? So media, just hold that up there. As you think about the world that we live in, do you see people of every age bewildered? Do you see people who have the sense that they are being harassed? Do you see people who are distressed? Do you see people who are dejected, people who are helpless, hopeless? Do you see folk who've been trying to get help in other places, but the help doesn't seem to be working? Because the problem that folks seem to be trying to fix just keeps getting worse and worse. It's real. You know I'm right. Got a question for you. Immediately, I'm through with that for right now. Got a question for you. What is your thought when you see them? Come on now, be for real, because the message can't help you unless you're for real. So when you're riding down the street and you see some people on the corner who look like they might be dysfunctional, who look like they might not be contributors to society, what are your thoughts toward them? When you see people who have lifestyles that don't measure up to what we expect, what do you see? Be honest. How do you judge young folk when their pants are hanging? And you see more of their underwear than you really want to see. Grown folk, what is your judgment on those folk? When you're riding to church on Sundays and on Wednesdays and other times, and you're coming to worship, and you have neighbors and you have people in your neighborhood who don't even go to church. What do you think about them? Those of you that work with children, maybe you're a teacher, maybe you in law enforcement, and so you work with children and grown folk who don't, get it just right. What is your thoughts about folk like that? Well, if we're going to be like Jesus, look at verse 36 again, because here it is. It says, but when he saw the multitude, the folk I just got through describing, he identified their problem. They were about to faint, but listen to what it says. He was moved with compassion on them. Do you have compassion on folk who got issues and problems and physical needs, spiritual needs, economic needs, and all of that goes with them, that makes them marginalized folk? What is your reaction as a believer? If we're going to be like Jesus, it has to be compassion. You know why? Because somebody who's qualified to help has to help. And the primary qualification for the helpers is that they have compassion on them. The problem, they're fainting, and the solution is that they need a shepherd. Look at verse 36 again. We just had Bible study today. He said, and they fainted, and they were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. The way to remedy their fainted state is for them to have a shepherd. Notice the word, they were scattered. Do you hear conversations like this? Those folk just can't come together. Families are breaking up. They can't stay together. This city, not together. This church, not together. Scattered. Why? Because they're like sheep that don't have a shepherd. And so implied in that verse, in this first picture that Jesus paints that identifies the problem of this masses, the multitude of people that's thronging him, is that they need a shepherd. And he's posing the question to the disciples, who will help them? Who will help that little boy who has grown up in a home where he's not heard about Jesus, where his basic spiritual need has been met? Who will help that little girl who's not been told about Jesus? Who will help that family that's lost and bewildered? Who will help that young mother who, instead of criticizing her for the number of children she got and her being overwhelmed, who will come along beside her to help her? Who has enough compassion? Because if you don't have compassion, you don't need to step there. Who will help that man, that woman who's stuck in a life, in a cycle of dysfunction because somebody in their childhood messed with them? And you look at the grown person and you condemn them for the way they act when you really don't know the real story. I submit to you right now that if I were a betting man and you were an honest crowd, I could ask the people, men and women, boys and girls, who've been molested by a family member to stand up, and there'll be some people standing up in this church. If this was an honest crowd and I could ask the question, there are people in here who right now are being physically, mentally, emotionally abused by people who supposed to love them. And they are not helping them. And they need some help. We live in an area where poverty is just rampant, and and you hear all these statistics about how poor we are and the dropout rate and jobs won't come and all this kind of stuff. But let me tell you something. That's just half, really it's not even half the story. I'm going to suggest it's 1/4 of the story. The 3/4 is there is spiritual poverty. Because you can bring all the jobs, all the money, all the housing, you can flush all the welfare, you can give everybody a check. But people who are spiritually impoverished will dress up in a suit, live in a nice house, and steal. In Cairo, we say, act the fool. Jesus. So who will help them? And can I tell you something else? In America, we've been fooled because just because a person goes to college, get an education, get a good job, we think they're all right. But that spiritual poverty got them hooked too. And they just dress it up. And they speak well, but they still lost. And so he says they're like sheep without a shepherd. And let me just say this to you. I don't mean to insult anybody. And the reason Jesus intentionally used the language and calls them, us, we sheep is because he's trying to say to you that you're too dumb to make it by yourself. He could have used any animal he wanted to, but he chose a dumb one. Which is his way of saying to us, you really can't make it without me. And so he says they need a shepherd. And he's the chief shepherd, but us, we are the under shepherds. So anybody here want to be an under shepherd? At least I keep you too long. I think you got that one. So that's the first picture when he asked the question, who will help? And now in 37, 38, he gives us a totally different picture and says, I need somebody to help. He says, the harvest truly is plenteous. Now, I know some of you are not agricultural people, so let me just break that down. He says, for example, there's a pecan grove right down across the woods here, whichever way I'm pointing. And later on in the fall, the pecans or the pecans, whichever you call them, in Cairo, we call them pecans. The pecans will be ready for harvesting. And all someone has to do is to go out and pick them. If you don't pick them, they fall off and they rot, or the wild hogs that's out there, and the deer and other stuff will eat them up. But the point is, the person who goes to harvest don't have to plant, don't have to water, don't have to fertilize, don't have to do any work. All you got to do is go. Because somebody else has already done that work, and all he needs is harvesters to go bring in the harvest. And Jesus is saying, when you see the multitude of those people, in that multitude are a group of people who, because of where they are, because of their circumstances, because of the work that he is doing in their life, he has prepared them, readied them to receive his gospel, to receive him, to receive help from his folk. And all I need are some people who are willing to go. look at verse 38, because this is the way we get them. He says, therefore, pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth. Don't miss that. As believers, we ought to be praying for God to send. For there to be folk who are willing to answer God's call to go, who are not content just to come to church and have a good time on Sunday, but to be ready to go on the mission field. Who will join the harvesting team? First, to pray that God will send, and for those that God called to go, that they will go. Who? Let me say this, and I'm almost through. This question that I'm asking is being asked in two ways. One, it is being asked in the singular. I'm telling you that it's every believer's responsibility to be a missionary. Don't you trip and think that it's left up to this group to do the mission work. But if you call yourself a follower of Jesus Christ, it is your responsibility to go. Not just to come in here, but wherever God places you, to have a mission mind and look for opportunities, because what the problem in the text presents is an opportunity. Don't cry because folk got issues, but rejoice because that issue presents an opportunity. Don't cry because the harvest is plenteous, but rejoice because now that's an opportunity for you to work in the harvest field. And so it's singular. It's singular in the sense that you don't even have to be a part of a ministry in Mount Zion, quote unquote, but you are the ministry all by yourself. And then secondly, it is a plural call, and it is collective. We as a church must be engaged in that. And you've heard me say to you before, there are churches that they have a business meeting and they vote on whether or not they want to engage in ministry. Y'all ain't going to get me to take that vote. I am not going to stand before God and say, God, I'm sorry, I know what you told me to do, but I asked the people if it was all right to do it. That ain't going to happen. I'm going to pay for some stuff when I get the judgment, but one thing I am not going to pay for is asking you to approve what God has already signed off on. You call it mean, you call it a dictatorship, I call it doing what God says above doing what you say. And so mission is what we do collectively as a church. And so for the few of you who think that we ought not be mission-minded, for the few of you who say to those folk who go to Haiti, y'all crazy for going over there. For the few of you who say, I don't see why we doing mission out there, we need to just stay home. I say for you, I am praying to the Lord of the harvest, the one who's in charge, to help you come out the dark into the light. And for those of you that are on board, I thank you from the depths of my heart for being in the crowd that says, yes, Lord, I will help. Hear me. If the church does not help, you talk about generations being lost, that's what's going to happen. Because there's nobody else out there that's offering help in a way that's going to have long-term benefits. There are people who are putting Band-Aids on people when they need surgery. And if we don't do it, it won't happen. Stop pointing your finger at the government because they won't help folk. That's our job, whether they help or not. And then understand that there are some governmental policies that are designed to cripple you and not empower you. And then there's some other people who try to do good, but let me tell you, their motive for doing good is not to lift you, but to stuff their pockets. And so if the church, out of a pure motive, doesn't get out there, it's not going to happen. And I want to appeal to the best in you first. Just do it because God wants us to do it, that we say yes, just like these folk, and I'm going to talk about them in just a minute, and the rest of us. But let me go down to that lower part of you. If you don't help them, two things you can count on. Sooner or later, you are going to be impacted by the consequences of our not acting. The boy or girl that live in my neighborhood that I don't help, just might grow up and be the one that kick my front door in and come rob me. And God forbid my daughter mess around and fall in love when I'm married. And he be the father of my grandchildren. But in some way, somehow, you just might end up being impacted. And here's the lower part of you. Let me appeal that again. You're going to reap what you sow. You're helping somebody now means that you plant the seed for somebody to help you when you are in need, because don't be fooled by your current circumstances. Before this life is over for you, you're going to need some help. And the person that you bypassed, you thought you were better than, you were too busy to help, just might be the person that come help you. You better be careful how you treat folk, because you may find yourself laying up in the hospital, and that same person you dissed may walk in that room with the needle in their hand. Maybe the police that come by your house to get you. You don't ever know how this circle is going to go. And so be careful. If this were not true, I would have presented this sermon in a totally different way. Today, I am appealing to those folk who are on the few people who are on the sidelines to get on board, but more importantly, just to reinforce what we are already engaged in, because I am thankful to say that this church and this General Missionary Society already has a mindset that our responsibility is to help. We put our time, we put our talent, and we put our treasure behind our talk. We ain't just meeting and eating like some missionary folk do. We're not where we ought to be, but I am so glad that we're not at the bottom of the totem pole. There's room to grow, room to improve, but I thank you that you have a mind. So let's remember that it's up to us. And if we don't help, they may not get help.
To order, call us at 229-432-6837 or visit our media page online at mtzionofalbany.org. Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.